So you would expect to see something different, but all you're going to see is a church. And sometimes there are churches over churches, and sometimes there are churches inside of churches. So in some cases, it was a little bit hard to really get the sense of the place. But still, just being in the vicinity of where Jesus ministered, knowing the things that he did there was just incredible. If you ever get the chance, you need to go. What you will see in these pictures is what, to the best of experts' knowledge, are the places where the events happen that I'll describe. A lot of excavation has been done, so a lot of artifacts have been found. There are people who explored the areas back in shortly after Jesus was there, and I say shortly, within a few hundred years of when he was there, and tried to follow in his footsteps. And so there's a lot of credibility given to a lot of these sites. There is discussion over whether we really went to the real Golgotha or Calvary. Personally, it didn't matter to me. I was just so close that was what was important. And actually, when you see the pictures that I have of the church that is over the place where Jesus was crucified, you'll understand what I'm saying about it was really hard to get a sense of that. I've got about 40 slides. It's not 3,000 pictures like the pastor said this morning. I did take over 3,000, but I'm not going to show you over 3,000, so hopefully we won't be here all night. What I'm going to try to do is go through this as quickly as I can, and then maybe give you a chance to ask questions at the end, because I think that'll be, how much you can tolerate sitting, I guess. And I did ask Mama if she wanted to say anything, because, we were on this trip together, and she said, well, no, because you'll probably cover it all. And so I guess she was just saying I'm a big mouth. But anyway, so LA, if you'll go into the next slide. So we started off our trip, and we flew into Tel Aviv, and the first day we went to the city of Joppa, or Jaffa. You'll notice on a lot of these slides there might be two names of the cities because of the name that it used to be in the Bible times, and then the name now. But that top left-hand side is the actual port as it is right now. And it is still functioning. And it's one of the oldest functioning harbors in the world. Now, I see a few youth in here. Y'all all know the story of Jonah, right? That's where he got on the ship. That's where the story started. The picture on the right-hand side is one of those churches that's built over the site of Simon the Tanner's house. And y'all know that is where Peter went, and he had a vision that he needed to go see Cornelius, who was a Roman centurion. And so, LA, if you'll go to the next slide, please. I just threw this in just so y'all can kind of see Tel Aviv as it is today. And on the right-hand side is one of the many markets that line the streets of almost all the towns in Israel that we went through. LA, can you go to the next one? When Peter was called to go to see Cornelius, the Roman centurion, Caesarea is where he went. And when we got there, we went to the palace of Herod the Great. Now, that doesn't look like much of a palace, but if you'll notice on the bottom left-hand corner, that was his swimming pool, y'all. And it was still, you can see still some of the rocks on the outside of it. Top right-hand corner is the amphitheater. You can actually see the track where they had the chariot races and the gladiator games. And we were told that excavations at that area had bones of, showed bones of people. So we know those gladiator games were held there. The next slide, please. This one I really enjoyed seeing. I'm going to see if this little thing works. This supposed to have a pointer here. There we go. Okay, so if you look like this is a room, another room, and then one behind it. So there were 3 rooms there. That's, part of the excavated rooms. And if you look over in Acts 24 and 25, you see where where Paul was brought up on charges for a lot of different things, disturbing the peace and, preaching a false gospel. And so he was appearing before Festus. And as he was charged, he told Festus and he told the court, he said, I'm a Roman citizen, so I want to appeal these charges to Caesar. And you can read that in Acts 25. One of these 3 rooms there is one of the rooms where Peter was held. And I just thought that was really cool to see. You begin to see the scripture coming alive because you see places where people were. The picture on the right-hand side is a reproduction of a stone that was actually excavated there, and it has the name of Pontius Pilate on it. And so that's proof, that the Bible is real, that these people that we read about in the Bible were really people who lived and had an effect on that area. Next slide. We went up to Mount Carmel, and y'all know that this is where the Elijah and the prophets of Baal had their major duel, I'd say, where they, Brian, I'll use your words, in Bubba language, they threw down. And so the picture on the left was actually taken from our hotel room. So that was really a cool view. That's looking over the port of Haifa, which is at the top of, or at one of the peaks of Mount Carmel. And the picture on the top right is actually a cave that is in a monastery. It's a Stella Maris monastery. And it's over the cave. But that cave is where they believe that Elijah lived. I don't know. Yeah, those pictures are a little bit bigger. You can see a little bit better. And then that bottom right picture is in all of these monasteries and churches and places, temples that we went, there was beautiful artwork. And so there were depictions of events in the life of Elijah, as well as some pictures of Jesus and things like that in those. Okay, next slide. We went to the port of, I'm going to say Akko because that's what I'm used to saying. And that top left-hand picture is as we're driving in. This was a really, really cool place. It was a very old port, and it was almost impenetrable. As we rode in, we saw the old walls from the walled city. And it was so hard to breach that city that Napoleon tried and couldn't. And so he went on to Joppa, those pictures we just looked at. What was interesting was when the Crusaders invaded, they learned from Napoleon, and so they went on over to the port of Joppa, went in there, then broke their ships down because what they wanted to do was take Jerusalem, and then they wanted to come and take the city of Akko. They broke their ships down, used the wood to build battering rams, and that's how they finally overcame this city. What you see in those other pictures there are excavated remains of the Crusaders' citadel. And I don't see Benny Barwick in here, but Benny was one that taught me some history in high school, and I'll just have to apologize to all my history teachers. I told Mama on this trip and the trip to Egypt, I wish I had listened better, and I wish that I had retained what I learned for the test, because it was so interesting to hear the history and hear about the Crusaders that went in here and took over. Y'all, this was massive, and then we went underground and walked through the underground part of it. One other interesting thing about this city, it was, if you read over in Judges, the first chapter of Judges, when God told the Israelites, he said, you drive out all the people from the land. And the Canaanites were some of those people. And y'all remember, they didn't do it. And the Canaanites were in this particular city. So just another piece of history coming alive. I wrote on my notes here, this was overwhelming right here. We were standing on the Tel Megiddo. Now, Tel, T-E-L, and y'all will see that in just a minute, means artificial hill. And we were standing at the top of Megiddo, looking out over the Jezreel Valley. And I wish, this picture does not do it justice. I wish that I could describe to you how wide it was, how long, how wide. I mean, we couldn't even see it. It's 145 square miles. And L.A. was looking at that slide the other day, and he said, how big is Lake Marion? Lake Marion's not that big. L.A., what'd you say? It's about the size of the city of Charleston? Something like that. So imagine, I've got some things written down up there, and I'm not going to read these slides to you. I think y'all can read that, but I've tried to write down some of the events that happened there. But this is what we believe by reading the Bible, where the Battle of Armageddon will be fought. And when you read Revelation 14:20, it actually says the grapes will be pressed in the winepress, and the juice will flow. But y'all, what we understand that to mean is the blood will flow as high as a horse's bridle in this place. I just stood there and cried. It was just amazing. Okay, next one. So Tel Megiddo, this is where we were standing, up on the top of that hill on the top left-hand corner. And this was where we really began to see some of the history of the different conquerings of places. Megiddo had been conquered and rebuilt at least 25 times. What armies would do when they came in, they invaded, they defeated a city, they took it, they would just destroy everything. And then they'd rebuild a city over it. And so it's really hard to see. But in that bottom left picture, our guide told us there was evidence you could actually see if you started counting layers, 25 different layers of civilization there. One of the reasons that Megiddo was taken and re-inhabited so many times was that King Ahab built a water system in it. And so imagine a walled city, and you've got no source of water. So he was smart enough to build a water system, including a huge cistern right in the city. The source of water came from outside of the walls. It was 182 steps down into that system, and we went down and then we had to come back up. But it was fascinating to me to realize how resourceful these people were with what they had. Okay? We went up on the Mount of Transfiguration, and our guide was an Arab Israeli Christian woman. And so she was our guide the entire time that we were in Israel. And she told us, she said, now, sometimes we may encounter problems with Muslims. Now, our driver was Muslim, and this was the first time they had worked together, and they worked together beautifully. But she said, particularly here on this mountain, our tour bus could drive about halfway up, and then we had to get out and get on shuttles. And so she said, now, Muslims run these shuttles, and if they find out that this is kind of a Christian group, then we may not get there very quickly. They may put us back behind some other groups or whatever. So she said, whatever you do, just let me handle things and let me do the talking. And so anyway, we got up there, and we waited our turn, didn't have any problems, started loading up on a bus because the bus driver came and said, come on, get on. And then all of a sudden we hear this commotion outside of our bus. And the driver gets off, and there's somebody yelling out there. And what happened was the group before us, their guide, their director, had miscounted the number of people. And so their group had gone up with all but 3 people on it. And the way they did this, they normally let groups go up together so you could have time to be in the chapel or whatever together. And then the next group would go up. So the driver was demanding that we get off the bus. And the leader of the other group said, well, no, if just 3 people will get off. So 3 of our group got off. And the 3 got on. And one of the ones that got on was the leader of the group. He was a priest. And so as we were driving on up the mountain, a lot of us were remarking that we sure are glad we didn't have to walk, because it was super steep. Mama, I don't remember. It seems like maybe it wound around. But I do know that this priest said, just imagine this. He said, imagine that you were back in the time of Jesus. Or right after, and you had made a pilgrimage to come to this place, and you had either walked or ridden a donkey or a camel or whatever for however far to get there, and then there were about 4,000 steps that you had to climb to get up this hill. He said, now imagine they did that. And then he stopped and he said, what do we do? How much do we do to get close to God? And y'all, that was just one story of hopefully several that I will tell you that I called God moments, because it was not an accident that priest was on that bus with us. God wanted us to hear that. So we went up. This was a Franciscan chapel on the top of this hill. You can see the 3 kind of peaked gables, I guess, on there. Those were they symbolized the 3 tents that Peter wanted to build. Because if you remember what happened here, Jesus, Elijah, and Moses appeared before Peter, James, and John. And Peter was so excited about it. He said, Lord, can we just camp here for a while? And so that's the significance of those tents. You'll see in other chapels that we'll show you that there was a lot of thought by the architects and the people who built these temples and these chapels into trying to portray what happened there through the architecture as well as the paintings and murals and things like that. The next slide is when we went to Nazareth, and again, a church over a church. The Church of the Annunciation is a Roman Catholic church, and it was actually built over 2 other churches that were there that were over the cave where they believe Mary was given the announcement that she was going to have the Messiah. That top right-hand corner is the cave, or the grotto as they call it. And also there's another church right nearby. I didn't get a picture of it because I was so interested in that bottom left-hand picture, the picture of Mary and Joseph and Jesus, or the statues of them. But that was a church that was over Joseph's workshop. So when you look and you realize, they're like right next door to each other. And in fact, I have a picture that I didn't include of they've excavated a kind of a hallway underground that looked like it went between the 2 places and joined them. And so Nazareth today is what you see. That's the city you see, or the area that you see on the hill in the distance there. Okay? If you were to ask me my most favorite place on the trip, this was it, the Sea of Galilee. And the reason I say that is a lot of the places that we went were so crowded. And Jerusalem especially, when walking the Via Dolorosa and going into the church that's over the places where Jesus was stripped and beaten and crucified, and his body was taken down, it was so crowded. And it's so covered with, the trappings of the churches that it's hard to get a sense of what happened there. But we got out on a boat, and you can see in the distance on that top left-hand slide, or you can see an old fishing boat. It would have been a replica of a boat like Jesus would have been on when he was on the Sea of Galilee. And we got out there, and we asked, our group agreed, let's listen to Christian music out there. So we did. And y'all, that was just a worship experience out there. Also, and I included the two pictures on the right because those were just a couple of views that you could see as you just looked out. This is a 33. I'm trying to look and make sure I'm telling you right. It's a 33-mile circumference lake is actually what it really is, a freshwater lake, even though it's called the sea. And everywhere you looked, all the way around, just hills. And one thing that made me so emotional was remembering how the scripture says the people just came over the hills and they just flocked to see Jesus, and to imagine them just coming down the hills to come to the edge of the sea to see him. The bottom right-hand corner is a place, I'll show you a little bit more about it more specifically in a minute, but it was on the north side of the lake. It's a place where 7 springs come together and pour into the Sea of Galilee. And they say because it's warm water meeting cold water, that it's a perfect place for fishing. And so that particular place was where people believe that Jesus called Peter, Andrew, James, and John. And you can't really see it here, but I'll show you a closer up picture of it. There's a church that commemorates him being there at another time and calling out to them and calling them in from their fishing. Let's go. Okay, he's ahead of me, y'all. He's going to keep me on time. He's going to keep me on track. This is the place where those 7 springs come together. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name of the place, but 2 particular things that we know about in the Bible happened here. When Jesus fed the 5,000, it said that they came and they sat on the hillside. And so there's a church over the spot that they believe was the vicinity that happened. And then when Jesus gave his Sermon on the Mount and gave the Beatitudes, that was also a church there. And you'll see that's the church in the middle on the bottom. Okay. So the slide on the top left is zooming in on that church that I was talking about, the Church of the Primacy of Peter. And I can't remember I don't think this was a Roman Catholic church, but anyway, the significance of this place was over in John 21, we read about after Jesus was resurrected, he appeared several times to his disciples. And one morning, the disciples were out on the Sea of Galilee fishing, and they saw somebody in the distance. And Peter recognized him as Jesus, and Jesus called him in. And when they got onto shore, they realized he had been cooking breakfast for them. And so the bottom left-hand picture is now, how they told this was the rock, I don't know, but this is a rock that they have kind of memorialized as being the breakfast rock where Jesus would have prepared that meal. I will tell you that the bottom right-hand picture, and I keep pointing back here, y'all, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the same thing y'all are looking. I just don't want to keep turning my back to you. Bottom right-hand picture, you see what looks like little heart-shaped stone or big heart-shaped stones on the ground. Constantine's mother, Saint Helen or Saint Helena, I've seen 2 different names, was one of those people who, in the years following Jesus' life on earth, she wanted so much to follow in his footsteps and to just get everything that she could about what he had done and where he had ministered. And so she would go around and she would talk to people, because people would pass down the stories over generations, and they'd tell about what they had seen. And so she identified this particular place, listening to the stories of the people and gathering as much information as she could. She's the one that identified this particular place as being the place that this event happened. And so anywhere that we went, if we saw those heart-shaped stones, that meant that was somewhere that St. Helena had basically validated what had happened there. I've got this picture in here just because I wanted to tell you, this was another God moment. We stayed in the city or town of Tiberias and stayed right on the Sea of Galilee. But Mama can attest to this. We went constant. We were gone. Y'all, for those who are in my Sunday school class who don't think I can get up before sunrise, we got up a bunch of days before sunrise. And a lot of times we didn't get back at night until 9:30, 10 o'clock. And so our guide had told us, she said, now before you leave Tiberias, make sure you go down and walk along they call it promenade, just a nice walkway that was along a part of the Sea of Galilee. And so Mama and I think the night before the next morning we were going to get up and leave. We walked down for a little while, but it was noisy and it was dark and we were tired. And so the next morning I got up early and I said, Mama, I'm going down to walk along the water. And so I did. It was really quiet. Nobody was out. I'm walking along this deck, this promenade, and I just have this urge that I need to go over and look over the side of the railings there because I just wanted to get as close to the water as I could. I was actually looking for a way I could go and get my feet in the water if you want to know the truth. But anyway, there was no way to get down. But as I was looking down, there was all this trash that had, the waves had moved the trash onto the shore of the sea. And I'd just been having this great time worshiping the Lord out there. And when I looked down and saw that trash, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe people have this beauty here and this place that just gives you the sense of Jesus. And look what they do to it. And y'all, I am not kidding. These were the exact words. I wrote them down because I did not ever want to forget them. In my head, I heard a voice that said, my child, you're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking down. You need to look up. And y'all, I just lost it, of course. But God just reminded me, if you take your eyes off of me, you're going to see all the junk in the world. Don't take your eyes off of me. Next. Another really cool place, just ruins everywhere. It's beautiful. We went to Capernaum, and that middle picture on the top is a good bit of the village that they've excavated there, and a lot of ruins there for everybody, but especially for some of the younger folks in here. I know y'all studied and heard about the friends bringing their friend that was paralyzed and putting him on a mat, dropping him through the ceiling. That happened right there, y'all. Now, I can't tell you which one of those places was a house, but that's where it happened. In the bottom left-hand corner, you can see under a church, you see the beams of the church like this, and then under there you see that circular set of rocks. That was the excavated ruins of Simon Peter's mother-in-law's house, and that's where Jesus went and healed the mother-in-law when she was sick and running a high fever. This is also a place where Jesus drove out demons out of a man, and a number of different miracles that he did here. The top right-hand sign, again, for people in my Sunday school class, you'll appreciate this. Y'all know I drive kind of fast and kind of, stop signs are slow and go. This was an ancient road sign. I'm not sure whether it was a stop sign. I think it was just a directional sign, but I really like that because I thought, I can't read it, but it's telling me where to go and how to get there. So, and then the bottom picture is an old synagogue from the 4th century. So our guide told us that the synagogue where Jesus would have gone here would have probably been right under the ruins of that church. So that was pretty cool too. This was another one of my favorite places, the Jordan River. And again, there's 2 locations that are traditionally held that people go to visit the Jordan River. This particular location, our guide gave us the choice. She said there's one closer into where we were, there's one out in the desert. the one out in the desert is where they believe Jesus, it was in the area where Jesus was baptized. Where do you want to go? You want to go farther out, or you want to stay closer in? We all, as a group, said, we want to go farther out. We want to go where you think Jesus was baptized. And so that's where this is. I included that picture on the bottom right because it shows the desert area. And the scriptures say that John was preaching in the desert, in the Judean desert, when Jesus approached him to be baptized. Some other things, that sign, y'all might can read that green sign, but just I'll quickly tell you, when Naaman, the king of the captain of the Syrian army, had leprosy, and he was told to go dip 7 times in the Jordan River. It was somewhere in this area where he went. This is also the place where it's believed that the Israelites crossed over the Jordan when they came into the Promised Land. And so there were several other things that supposedly happened there also, but it's just really, really cool. Mama and I walked down into the water, prayed over each other, and dropped a few drops of the water on our head. It was kind of gross water, but anyway, I mean, you know, we wanted to be baptized in it, but we settled for that. We went on to near Bethlehem to Shepherd's Field, where the angels came and made the proclamation, the first announcement of Jesus' birth to the shepherds. The picture on the left is a little chapel there that's over the cave. That's the middle picture on the bottom. That's a cave where they believe that the shepherds were keeping their sheep in to keep them protected. The reason I included that middle picture on the top, the one with the cross, is there are ruins of a first century church that were being excavated right there, just right below that cross. And then back in the background, which really can't see, I mean, way over on the hill, is actually the current city or town of Bethlehem. Next. We went on to the birthplace of Jesus, and it's the whole area is called Manger Square. There is a church, again, in the top left-hand corner, Church of the Nativity, that's over the place where they believe that Jesus was born. When I have to tell this on Mama, before we left, she came up to the house one night to eat, and she says, "Have you been practicing?" I said, "Practicing for what, Mama?" She said, "To go through the humility door." Well, up there on the right-hand side, that picture up there is the humility door. It's 4 feet high. And that's the door you have to go through to get into this church, to then go down into the cave where they believe Jesus was born. I said, "Well, Mama, no." So she takes, we measure my island. She says, "Now we have to get down, and you think you can get in there?" So yeah, we're practicing. We made it. We got in. But I thought that was very interesting too, that we need to come to Jesus humbly. Recognizing who he is. Again, a cave in this church was, you waited in line forever, and then you went down in this cave, and there were 2 markers. The one on the bottom left is an altar that was over the spot where they believe Jesus was actually born. And then the other picture on the bottom on the right is a screen that's covering a part of the cave. And they believe that in that cave is where Jesus was actually laid in the manger, as we call it, or the feed trough or whatever. So that's a really good example of, how it's not anything like what you would picture, because there's so much stuff over it, but still to understand what happened there or happened in that vicinity. I just included this because inside these churches and these basilicas and chapels, beautiful things, these are all back from the 4th century, and these are original. The tile mosaic on the floor, that top left-hand picture, is back from Constantine's era. And so just, the history that we saw was incredible. All right, I'm going to see how I'm doing on time. Actually, I'm doing really good. LA's doing a good job of keeping me on track. He's moving me along. This was another really cool place. We did not stop here. And so my pictures have a little bit of glare and reflection on them, but we were driving by, and the pictures on the left are of Qumran. And y'all know about the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? These are in the area where they were found. And I don't know if you can see up in that top picture, you see like little black holes looking like in the sandstone or limestone. Those are caves. And I am going to take the time to tell this because I just think it's amazing how God works. Some Bedouins had sheep and goats out in that area. And they had lost some of their goats. And so they go to look for them, and they realize there's so many caves there. Y'all, excuse me, I just realized my flashlight's on for whatever reason. So excuse me 1 second while I try to cut it off. Never mind. Just put it out of the way. They were trying to find their goats, and so they started looking in the caves, and they realized there's too many caves, we'll never find them that way. So they started throwing rocks in the caves. And as they threw the rocks, they figured they'd either hit a goat and scare them out, or the sound would scare the goats. So they threw rocks in this cave, and they heard this noise that sounded weird. And so they went in to explore, and they found these jars, these pottery jars, and brought them out, and they realized there were scrolls in them. Well, these Bedouins couldn't read, so they had no idea what they had. But what they thought was, according to our guide, and I guess this is according to history and legend, we need new sandals. This is good paper. This is heavy paper. So they took those scrolls to a shoemaker. Thank goodness the shoemaker could read and recognize that this was Old Testament writings. Bought the scrolls from them, and our guide said, now, he did them right because they bought a lot of sandals after that. But he bought the scrolls from them and then got them into the right hands so that we would have these recorded these recordings that we have that are from the Old Testament and just are part of what we read now. The pictures, back up just a second, LA. The pictures on the right are caves at En Gedi, and I really wish we could have gone in here because I really love this story. Y'all remember when King Saul got just really enraged with David, and he started chasing him all over the place, and David would run away, and David didn't want to kill the king, even though he was to be the next king of Israel. And they would hide out in these caves. He would hide out in these caves, and then they'd sleep in the caves. And one day, Saul went into a cave, and I'm not trying to be gross. The Bible says he went in to relieve himself, and David and his men were in that cave. And the men were saying to David, kill him. Here's your chance. Go kill him. And David said, no, I'm not going to dishonor the king of Israel. And so he went and he cut a piece of his robe off so that Saul would know that he had been there. Y'all, it happened right there in those caves. And that's why I say I wish we could have gone in there. Anyway, you can go on now. Masada, I did not know the story of Masada before we went either. My mama had read a lot. She what happened at Masada? And so she was filling me in. But this is way out in the desert. And in fact, in the top right-hand corner, you can see through the walls there, you can see the Dead Sea. And so this was a fortress and a palace that Herod had built out there. This was kind of like his summer retreat, I guess, but also a place that he could go and be protected if he needed to be. Way up there, super, you could easily defend it. So back in 66 AD, when the Jews and the Romans, it says it's the first Jewish-Roman war, a group of Jewish zealots actually escaped Jerusalem and went and overtook the fortress at Masada and began to live there because they didn't want to be captured by the Romans and put into slavery with them or killed. Over a period of time, more of the people from Jerusalem came, and eventually there were over 960 people there. As Rome continued to take over Jerusalem and then other places, they came to Masada and they set siege to this place. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you're standing way up here, and looking down, and you can see that outline of that Roman camp. And I could just imagine people standing up there and looking down and seeing the enemy and knowing how close they were. But the people that were living there had decided they were going to die before they would be taken captive. And so when the Roman soldiers finally breached Masada and came up over that final wall, everybody in there was dead except for 5 children and 2 women. They had committed suicide to avoid being taken captive by the Romans. So you can imagine that the sense of that place was heavy, just knowing what happened there. You can move on. Just some pictures of the I couldn't wait to get the Dead Sea. You literally cannot sink. It is, I read this, it's 30 times saltier than any other body of water in the world. And I included some scripture up there because the Dead Sea was actually given as part of the boundaries of Canaan. You can move on, L.A. Got ahead of you. We actually went by Jerusalem the day that we were supposed to go there. We went through, and the picture up top on the left shows you a bunch of tour buses that were up on the Mount of Olives near the Garden of Gethsemane. And it was a Thursday, I believe, because the Jewish bar mitzvahs were being held in Jerusalem that day. So we actually went to a different place that day because it was so crowded, came back through Jerusalem. I don't remember which day it was there. It doesn't matter. But just that picture on the top is the graves that are on the Mount of Olives. And those are super Orthodox Jewish people who have paid a lot of money to be buried there because they believe on what they call Resurrection Day. And remember, these are people who probably have not recognized Jesus as the original Messiah. But when Jesus does come, they think that this is the place that he's going to come to first. And so they figure if they're buried there, they're going to be the first ones to be resurrected. So the most recognizable site in all of Jerusalem, probably in all of all of Israel, is the Dome of the Rock, that gold dome that you see. And that's really kind of a sad story to me. I'll tell you a little bit about, this is, as our guide said, this is the importance of that particular place to the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians. The Jews believed that this was the very place that God first created the Garden of Eden, that this was where the Garden of Eden was. They also believed that this is the site of not just the temple, but the Holy of Holies. So this would have been the most holy part of the Jewish temple. And that's where they believed the site was. Now, again, we could argue that might not be where it is. I don't know, but that's what's traditionally held. And then Muslims believe, also Jews and Christians believe that this is also the site of where God told Abraham, take your son Isaac up on the mountain and offer him as a sacrifice. So it's extremely, extremely important to the Jews, to Christians, to the Muslims. They believe that this is the place that Muhammad ascended into heaven. And why I say it's so sad is the Muslims built this temple, whatever they call their church buildings, over this site so that they would have control over it, and the Jews could not get to the place that was so holy to them. I'll get to another set of pictures in a minute, and back up 1 second. We went into Jerusalem that day and took the route that Jesus took on Palm Sunday. And that was kind of, that picture on the right is the beginning of it. And it sees where you can see looking out over the city of Jerusalem. Okay, go ahead. I don't remember how long. Oh, yeah, we walked 7 to 8 miles that day. So it was a long, long walk. Y'all, I realize we've been here about 45 minutes. Do y'all want to stand up and take a break, or are y'all good? Okay, all right. So as we were walking along this Palm Sunday route, over in Luke, and I think it says it in other places, but I put the Luke version up there. There was a place where Jesus stopped, and it says he wept over the city. And he wept because, one, the people that were supposed to know the most about him or about God, the Jews, the Pharisees, and they didn't believe he was who he said he was. So they were weeping over, he was weeping over that, but he was also weeping over the upcoming destruction in a number of years of the temple. And so that little chapel that was there is actually supposedly in the shape of a teardrop to commemorate that event. That bottom picture on the right-hand side these were just massive stones. We had gone up to, we were on the way to the western wall, which includes the Wailing Wall, which is where people go when they put prayers in the cracks of the wall. It's where devout Jews go and pray and study and all, and that's that top right-hand corner that you can see people sitting there and praying and studying. But as we approached that, our guide told us, she said, look over this edge here and look at all these massive stones that are down here, just laid out all around. And she said, those are still some of the original temple stones when the temple was destroyed, as Jesus said it would be. When the Muslims came in and took over this area, they left those stones lying there, as she tells it, so that the Jews would realize every time they went by them how much they'd lost because of the temple. And so again, it was, there's a lot of humanity and the bad side of humanity that you see in some of what was going on there. At Gethsemane, this is the Church of All Nations, the two pictures on the left-hand side, beautiful, beautiful basilica called the Church of All Nations, or Basilica of Agony. And it is supposedly over the place where Jesus prayed in the Garden of Gethsemane. And there was a stone in there that they believe is one of the stones that he leaned on to pray on that night. The picture on the right-hand side is some of the olive trees in the Garden of Gethsemane. A lot of people have asked, did we walk through it? We couldn't, because they had, all of that was fenced in, but we could look over into it and see that area. You can go ahead. As we walked along the Via Dolorosa, I just included these pictures because it's a great example of different ways that art was on display. The two pictures, far bottom left and middle bottom, were doors that were on different chapels going along the Via Dolorosa. You can see on the one on the left, the cross, the nails in the circle, and then the middle picture depicted the crown of thorns, the thorns going around there, and then just a couple other pictures that showed different scenes of Jesus as he was taken along and the way that he was treated. I don't remember, I should have looked this up. I don't remember how many stations. There were a bunch of what they call stations of the cross along the Via Dolorosa. In other words, the route that Jesus took the day that he was taken to be, from the time that he was arrested and taken to be tried, if you will, all the way through until he was taken to be crucified. The church on the top right is called the Chapel of Condemnation. And that's where Pilate heard the people requesting that Jesus be crucified. And even though the picture on the top left is a stained glass picture of him washing his hands. Remember, Pilate said, "I find no fault in this man," but the crowd wanted him crucified anyway. One thing that just stuck with me in that bottom left-hand corner, y'all, that looks kind of like it almost to me looks like a tic-tac-toe board, right? That was etched in the stone floor of this basilica. And what that supposedly is, according to the excavations, is where the Romans would play games while they waited for the criminals to be dealt with. And I just thought about how casually sometimes we treat Jesus. They had the Messiah in their presence and they were playing games. Two other pictures. The middle bottom picture is a chapel that's over where they believe the sepulcher or the burial where Jesus was buried. That's over that. And then the picture on the bottom right is a stone that they believe was where Jesus' body, after it was taken down off the cross, was laid to be anointed. Now, I didn't include other pictures, again, because they have so many altars and things over them. But this, supposedly, those two pictures and others that I have where the cross actually was, where Jesus was where his clothes were taken off and he was hung on the cross. All of these are covered by churches. And as you go in, there are people everywhere. And it's really, really, really hard to get the sense of the gravity of what happened there. To understand that this is where my Jesus gave his life for me. And as I came home and I was thinking about that and I was looking at the pictures again, because people said, did you cry when you saw the place where he died? And I said, well, honestly, no. I was too busy just trying to get up and down the steps and get out of people's way. I mean, honestly. And so I thought about that from the standpoint of how cluttered and crowded our lives get sometimes, that it crowds out the importance of Jesus in our lives. Y'all, let's don't be guilty of that. Where Jesus was taken when he was arrested, he was taken to Caiaphas's palace. And this particular church, the church in the top middle picture, was over that palace. The picture in the middle on the bottom is some of the excavated remains of Caiaphas's palace. And this would have been where Jesus was taken after he was arrested. And in that place, we actually walked down into some dungeons that were below ground. They say that there was a hole, and we looked into the hole that they lowered Jesus down into the dungeon. That's what that picture on the bottom right is about. But this is one place where I want to read scripture, because we walked down into this dungeon. So I want y'all to imagine going down into this pit and standing there. And there was scripture there that there were a lot of suggested readings. And it wasn't happenstance. I mean, God just inspired whoever looked at it to read this particular reading out of Psalm 88. And they read the whole chapter. Y'all go home sometime and read it, but I just want to read these few verses. Remember, Jesus is here. He's been arrested. He's awaiting his crucifix, or he's awaiting to be crucified the next day. He already knows what's coming, right? And this is out of Psalm 88, starting at verse 2. I am overwhelmed with troubles, and my life draws near to death. I am counted among those who go down to the pit. I am like one without strength. You have put me in the lowest pit, in the darkest depths. Your wrath lies heavily on me. You have overwhelmed me with all your waves. You have taken me from my closest friends and have made me repulsive to them. I am confined and cannot escape. My eyes are dim with grief. Now imagine standing in that pit where they believed Jesus was held and hearing that out of the Old Testament, that prophecy of how the Son of God would be in that place. We walked through a lot of the gates of Jerusalem. We rode by others. I just included these pictures because you've read about it in the Bible: the Damascus Gate, the Zion Gate, the Jaffa Gate, the Dung Gate. Especially when you read Nehemiah and talks about he goes around to these different gates. I just thought that was really, really cool. You can move on. We went to Enkaram, which is the place that John the Baptist was born. There were two churches there, one at the bottom of a hill and one at the top of a really steep hill. The one at the bottom, the picture in the middle on the top, it was over a cave, and they believe that the cave is where John the Baptist was born. The church on the top of the hill, they call it the Church of the Visitation, and they believe that is the spot where Mary came and visited her cousin Elizabeth. And the little plaque-looking thing down in the corner is the Magnificat, which is out of Luke 1, when Mary literally burst into song as she sees her cousin Elizabeth. And I believe in the scripture it also says that John leapt in his mother's womb as he recognized that the Savior, who had not been born yet, that he was going to be in the presence of him. This is another God moment that happened there. We walked up, it was a really steep hill that we walked up, a lot of different steps. Because it was a big group, we took advantage of restrooms, and so we stopped on the way up. And our guide, I noticed that she was gone for an unusual amount of time. She, a lot of times, would walk away from the group when we took breaks to make some phone calls and rearrange things if we needed to. But she was just gone a really extra long time that day. And I was getting a little antsy, as Mama says, because Mama had actually stayed with a group of ladies down at the bottom of the hill, and I was like, I'm in a foreign country and my mama's not with me. I'm getting a little worried. But so I was noticing the time. She came back and she looked a little bit distracted, but she didn't say anything. We walked up on the hill, up the hill, went into the church there. She explained everything. We walked back out into this really beautiful courtyard. And as we were waiting for all the group to come back together, to go back down the hill together, I don't remember whether one of us asked her if everything was okay or whether she just simply said, I need to ask you all if you will remember my granddaughter in prayer. I believe her granddaughter at the time was about four or five, I think. And what she had been gone, the reason she had been gone making all these on the phone was her daughter had been calling her. Her granddaughter, when she was an infant, had lost a kidney. So the granddaughter only has one kidney. The daughter had called her just crying and just really upset because the granddaughter, Colette's granddaughter, was having a lot of problems, and they were problems with the remaining kidney. And Colette, our guide, was very upset because she could not be there with her daughter. I mean, she's responsible for our group, so she can't leave. And she said, can I ask you all to, as you say your prayers tonight, to remember my granddaughter? And I don't recall who it was that said, but we just kind of all as a group, we just surrounded her and right there prayed for her and prayed for her granddaughter. Well, y'all, here's the cool thing. One of the guys in the group was a doctor, and we knew that. You know what kind of doctor? A nephrologist, a kidney doctor. And so we had these little things called whispers that were in our ears so that we could hear, even if we were off a little bit from the group, we could hear the conversation or hear the information that the tour guide was giving us. And so usually if she was having conversations with somebody privately, she cut hers down, but she did not cut hers down this time. And as they were going down the hill, I heard her talking. The nephrologist got right there with her and began to talk with her. And then later that night, after dinner, I asked her, I went and I said, "Are you feeling better? Have you heard any more from your granddaughter?" And she said, "I've talked to my daughter. The doctor actually gave me exact questions to ask so that I could tell my daughter what to ask the doctors to figure out exactly what was going on." Y'all, it was no accident that doctor was on that trip. And I couldn't help but think about us being able to pray for her right there on the spot. And we've kept up with her over the years since we've been there, and her granddaughter's doing great. So praise the Lord. So we went on to Jericho, and y'all know the story of Zacchaeus climbing the sycamore tree. That bottom right-hand picture is a more than 1,000-year-old sycamore tree. They lived for a long time. We didn't climb it, but we stood in front of it. We went up this humongous mountain. The picture up there on the top left just doesn't do it justice. But that is a mountain out in the middle of the desert. If you go over and read Matthew 4, I just put 1 through 4, but if you keep on reading, it says that Satan tempted Jesus by taking him up on the top of a mountain and saying, "If you'll bow down to me, I'll give you all of this." And so that was a place where that's where they believe that happened. Ella, you can go on. So people ask us, what did you eat in Jerusalem? Yeah, the food was so good. But look how colorful. I had to take some pictures of the food. We ate well. And the bottom middle picture is a guy right out on the street, just fresh pomegranates, just squeeze them and here's your drink. It was wonderful. You can go on. So then we crossed over into the country of Jordan. And we went a number of different places, but I tried to keep these slides to the places that had some significance in the scripture. And so the place that I was most looking forward to going, and this is it, is Mount Nebo, where Moses went up and stood. So LA, if you'll go to the next slides, please, next slide. This is the view that we saw looking out over, and you can, those pictures aren't real good. It was really hazy that day. But our guide actually said, he said, y'all are really lucky because a lot of times you can't even see the Dead Sea. That's the Dead Sea there on the left-hand side. And on a really, really clear day, you would be able to see all the way over into Jerusalem. So this is where God took Moses up and said, I'm going to let you see the land. But because you didn't take charge of the people, and the people disobeyed me, you can't go in. That's another place, y'all, where it was a sense of heaviness to me when I was there. We went all the way down to the southern part of Egypt to go into Petra, and I'll show you those slides in a minute. But we stayed in a place called Wadi Musa, or the Valley of Moses. And so I have those pictures in there so y'all can get a sense of the desert and how big it was. Those were taken from the bus up on top of a hill looking back over Wadi Musa. But this is the area that it's believed that the Israelites settled in when they were 40 years in the desert, and also where Moses struck the rock instead of just God being able to provide water. Moses had a little temper tantrum and slammed a stick down on the rock to make water come out. Next. This is another place. I didn't have any idea what Petra was. Before we went, Mama said, you know what, are you excited about going to Petra? I'm like, I don't know what Petra is. Y'all, it is the most incredible place. The middle picture is, and well, all of those pictures in the middle and to the left are what they call the Siq, S-I-Q. And that's just this narrow passageway through these monstrous mountains. Petra, you can read, was inhabited, they believe, as early as 9,000 BC. And the reason it was a place where people wanted to be was it was so easy to defend it because it was just this one way in. And I mean, you just went all through it, just with these colossal mountains around you. Next slide, please. The people that inhabited it, the Nabateans or the Nabateans, whichever way you want to say it, were known because they were carvers of tombs. That's how they made their living. But when you walk out of the Siq, the first really place that opens up is this place you see on the left. That's called the Treasury. And y'all, that is carved out of the mountain. Now, this is limestone and sandstone, so it's, easily carved. Well, I say easily. I didn't do it, but, it wouldn't be like trying to go through granite. And then the picture on the top right is tombs and caves in there. Next one. I had tons of pictures here. It was gorgeous, but the next one. I wanted to just give y'all perspective. That was just one of the areas. That was a temple area. And those little tiny white dots that you can see kind of in the center of the picture, those are people walking up. So that gives you an idea of the immensity of this place. It was just incredible. And there were Roman ruins down in there. It was just unbelievable. And this, again, was near the area. We don't believe the Israelites were ever there, but this was near the area. We went, like I say, to a number of other places in Jordan, but this was the last place I'll show you because this is the last place that really had any reference to the Old Testament. This was Jerash. And there were beautiful, beautiful ruins there from Roman ruins. That particular picture on the bottom left, a lot of y'all know I like heights. And I climbed all the way up those steps after our guide had taken us in there, showed us everything, and he said, now I'm going to give you some free time. So I climbed all the way up. Those are people on the bottom, so that gives y'all an idea of how far up I was. And I looked around, I was taking pictures. I was so excited taking some of those pictures you see. And I looked around, and I realized there wasn't a soul there that knew me. And the second thing I realized was there's not a handrail in sight. How am I going to get down from here? And y'all, literally, I prayed. I said, Lord, stupid is as stupid does, but please get this stupid fool from South Carolina down out of here. And I literally turned around and backed down those steps. That's the only way. Because think about it. This is slick rock, And so the Lord was with me and delivered me. One other really cool thing, I don't know if you can see them. And again, I'll try to use this little pointer thing. Well, I can't get it to work out. Yeah, LA, if you'll take the mouse, come to the bottom right-hand picture, and to a little bit more to your right. I don't know if you can see it very well there, but come over to the left. You kind of see a rut about, keep coming to the left a little bit more, whoop. Yep. Anyway, there's two ruts here. One's kind of right here, and one's kind of right here. And if you kind of look, you can see the ruts. Y'all, those were literally ruts made by the chariots that went down that road. I got down on the ground with my camera to take the picture because it fascinated me so much. Just geeky things like that. But the last slide that I've got, just for Jimmy and for Leslie, mostly for Jimmy, to show you I can get up at sunrise. But it was just beautiful, y'all. I mean, everywhere we went, God just overwhelmed us with the beauty that was around us and the richness of the history that was there. And everything about it was just incredible. So it is 7:42. That's the end of the slides. Now, I have, if you actually want to see more someday, you can come see me and borrow. I have 3 photo albums full of pictures. But does anybody have any questions? Or?
I have a question. I noticed when you went to Petra and you had all those caves and tombs and all those places, I never saw one electric pole.
Mm-mm.
So there's no electricity.
Mm-mm. No. And I think there might still be some people living there. I know that they had tried to take people, move them in what they called settlements. They tried to get the people out of there, but I think there's still people living there. And there were shops and things in there. I don't know how they kept stuff cool, but yeah, I mean,
So like
no
when you
light
went
bulbs.
in those caves, they like had lights, or how would you see?
Just sunlight as much as you could, the natural light.
A very interesting book called I Married a Veteran. I liked it so much I read it 3 times. This New Zealand lady went there to visit, and she ended up marrying a veteran and lived there until he died. But she has come back now to run a shop or whatever. What's the name of that book?
The book is called I Married a Bedouin, and it's about a woman who she actually went to Petra to visit, met this Bedouin. He took her back to his cave, and she hung out and stayed, and they got married, and it is very, very interesting. Any other questions?
You're talking about sunrise. We're having sunrise service in a couple of weeks.
That's right.
If you get up and come over early, right now, the sun is breaking about 4 to 10 seconds. You may able to see something spectacular.
Yes, sir. No, Jimmy, you're right. It's nothing like sunrise service on Easter morning. It's just something special. And gosh, it was, I started to tell you the temperature in Egypt because that's what I remember. It was around 100 most days. And like when we went up to Masada, I'd say it was probably about 105, something like that. Because, I mean, it was hot. Why do you think I was way down in the Dead Sea? I was getting cool. It was hot. That was August. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was very dry heat. Yeah, we didn't have any sinus problems or anything. Just.
Do they have seasons?
They have what?
Do they have all the seasons?
They're very mild. Yeah, it was August and it was in the hundreds.
They welcomed me. Obviously, they knew y'all were not from there. They welcomed you. They decided to see tourists, or they kind of.
That's an interesting question. When we were in the church to go see where Jesus was born, the Church of the Nativity, there were it was a long line to wait. We probably waited in line 2.5 to 3 hours, and then you had people kind of trying to get in front of you and this, that, and the other. But these rabbis literally, I mean, like meanly called our group down because we were talking, passing the time, and a couple of ladies did get a little bit loud. But we were getting close to to go down into the cave where they say that Mary was and where Jesus was born. And I mean, y'all, I thought they were going to throw us out. They were very, very angry with us for being disrespectful, they thought. And we apologized, Anybody where we stayed at hotels and things like that, so anybody that dealt with the tourism part of it was very welcoming. We didn't really encounter too many problems with anybody being, threatening or anything like that. In fact, the only time we saw any violence, if you will, was we were walking up to that church of St. Peter, and 2 bus drivers got into a fight over who was parking their bus where. And I mean, y'all, they brought the sticks out and they were going to beat on each other, and we were standing there gawking, and our guy was like, get out of the way, come on, leave. But I brought, my daughter had given me a journal as a gift. She said, Mommy, you can use it for your trip. And in the journal, it had scripture. And so literally the second day that we were there, September 17th, the scripture in the top of my journal says, then you will go on your way in safety, and your foot will not stumble. When you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. And we were exhausted, so we slept really well. But what I even wrote and remarked was we had so many people praying for us before we went and while we were there, that we never, ever felt afraid. We never felt threatened. We walked in Tel Aviv the night we got there. It was probably 10 o'clock at night. We walked across 4 lanes of traffic and went over to the Mediterranean Sea, safe as could be. And people were kind. They didn't go out of their way to help you necessarily, but they were kind. So we didn't really encounter anything except that one place, at the Mount of Transfiguration, where the Muslims were.
About the bus, you said something, who was the drivers? You said something about it, maybe there were a bunch of Christians on the bus.
Oh yeah, at the Mount of Transfiguration, because the shuttles there were run by Muslims, that if they knew we were Christians.
Atheists, or they thought y'all were Muslims?
I mean, there's all kinds of people that come and go there, so they didn't really know who we were or what we were, but I think just, I think too it just kind of depended on the day, whether they'd had a good day or a bad day. And so our guide just warned us to just, be careful and be respectful even if they treated us badly. And that's why I say that we had had several different times that God just reminded us, hey, you're my people, and you're my people, be my people. Any other questions? All right, y'all, thank you so much. I know this was a little bit long, but that was 13 days worth of travel in a place that, I hope I'll go back to one day, but I don't know. So thank you very much.
Is there anything you missed that you want to go back and see? Like I didn't get to see or you wanted to see?
When we were traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho on the road, our guide told us that was known as the Gospel Road because Jesus traversed that road so much, going to different places. And I did see a sign that said Good Samaritan pointed up. And so, we didn't see that particular place. And yes, there were probably a lot of places that I would love to see. I'd just love to go back just for where it is. All right, Pastor. Thank you.
My goodness.
Thank you.
That was good stuff, isn't it? How many of y'all want to go? Oh, I
You gotta ask God.